This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury, Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 at Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, best in new inventory, great pre-owned inventory with the all-important Sunbury Motors guarantee. Terrific service department. Whether it happens to be quick lane, inspections, routine, difficult, they handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. We'll get to Gerry Dulac in a moment, as soon as we get Gerry on the line. Talking to him about the Steelers. Made the playoffs again. But again, you feel like they're treading water. And I've used the Atlanta Hawks reference many times. The reason is the Hawks were always one of those teams that was good enough to get into the playoffs as a 7 or 8 seed. This is before they expanded. Not advance, play well, but not advance, and also be out of the lottery. Kind of feel the same way about what to watch with the Steelers for years. First of all, my good friend, Happy New Year to you. It is so wonderful to hear you.
Well, Steve, Happy New Year to you. It's always good to chat with you, my friend. And I'm still disappointed over that loss. And I don't mean the Steelers loss. I mean the Penn State loss.
Yeah, I know. That was under the category of tough and about as tough as it gets. So
Yeah,
it really was.
And, I agree. I thought they played very well. And to have it end like that on an unfortunate throw, kind of stings a little.
Yep, no question. All right, so this Steeler team, you know sports as well as anybody. I've always talked about their recent run, and the last few years, that they remind me of the Atlanta Hawks of the NBA. Good enough to get in the playoffs, give a fight in the opening round, not win, and then not get the lottery pick either because they made the playoffs. What's your thought on that analogy?
Yeah. I mean, the Atlanta Hawks one, I get. I'm surprised you bring them up. Man, in my younger day, I was a Pete Maravich guy, and I used to tune into the Atlanta Hawks games on the radio all the time. So it's funny you say that. But no, there's no question about it, and that's part of the conundrum. They're good enough to always have a winning season. You know, playoffs last 2 years, 4 of the last 5, 12 or 13 times in Mike Tomlin's 17 years. But not bad enough to pick high enough, even like they did when they got Ben Roethlisberger, when they got him at number 11. Right. And so you're only going to get those difference makers, for the most part, not only, but your chances are better of getting those guys in the upper tier of the first round. And, you know, they went up 10 spots to number 10 to get Devin Bush. I applaud the move. I did not applaud the results.
Right.
But that's where they are. And so if they want to get a quarterback like that, then then they might have to go up. I will tell you, Steve, they considered and looked into trading up to get Kenny Pickett, which would have been a big mistake. But
Right.
to me, if you're going to trade up like that, then you go get a difference maker, because those difference makers, for the most part, are in the early parts of the draft of the first round. So, yeah, they're kind of stuck in that position, and that's why when people complain about their drafts, all in all, considering where they pick, they've been pretty good all in all, especially with their number one picks. Oh yeah, they've had a few misses, but for the most part, their number one picks have worked out pretty well considering where they're picking.
Right, exactly. But again, the difference makers are usually in the first 10 somewhere. So what do you think they'll do at quarterback? I mean, with Wilson and Fields, how do you think it plays out?
Yeah, I'm curious to see, Steve, and I think you've heard me say when we've talked that when they agreed and Russell Wilson agreed to the deal in free agency, the Steelers and Wilson, his people, each intended to sign a longer-term deal after the season.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to stick with that premise, then I will say he will be back.
Okay.
But if I look at what transpired the last 5 games and the way the offense struggled, the defense was even worse. But, 5 straight games without scoring more than 17 points, Steve, that hasn't happened since Chuck Noll's first season, where they went 5 consecutive games with no more than 17 points. Is that the coordinator? Is that the running game? Is that the offensive line? Is it the quarterback? Is it that the receivers can't get open? It's probably a number of those factors. And so to lay the blame at the feet of Russell Wilson, I'm not in that camp. Now, I'm not sitting here going to tell you that it's everything else. But I think there's a number of factors that played into this. For those 7 games where he was 6-1, they were averaging 28 points, Steve, and the offense looked like a unit capable of finally being able to bail out the defense if they got in those shootout types of games, which they did in Cincinnati, 44-38 on December 1st, which was the last game they ended up winning. So I'm curious to see how it's going to play out, but, this is the 3rd time in the last 4 years they head into the offseason with uncertainty at quarterback. And so I don't know if going out and bringing in another guy is the answer. I actually think after all the moves they made last year, I think they're in a worse position now than they were last year, even though there are portions of their team that are much improved.
Right. That's interesting because
they proceed.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jerry.
No, I'm just going to say it's going to be interesting to see how they proceed at quarterback. Both running backs are free agents, Steve. And let's face it, that wide receiver room will be, it just has to be, and it will be addressed both in free agency and the draft, because what they have there just isn't even nearly good enough.
So let me ask you about the George Pickens question. There's no doubt about the talent, but you and I both know there's a lot more to this than just talent. How do the Steelers need to approach this guy or approach the situation, in your opinion?
Well, I will tell you even more than my opinion, because my opinion probably matches up with what they are eventually going to do. And, they've been through this before with other guys. They are not going to give George Pickens the second contract. He has 1 more year on his deal. It has been told to me that you look at Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant and Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool, and you could throw Le'Veon Bell in there. You know how many Super Bowls the Steelers have even been to with those guys? None. 0.
None.
And so those guys look great with their talent, but in the end, they're not the kind of guys you're going to win with. And George Pickens is right near the top of that list. And so I don't know when the departure is going to come, but at some point, general managers and coaches around the league always are leery of how a guy is going to be when he gets the money, when he gets his second contract. Well, George Pickens is already at that stage, and he hasn't even gotten a second contract. So I don't know when the separation is going to come, whether it's before the season or after the season. But I don't think George Pickens' mail will be delivered here much longer than 2025.
Very interesting. Very interesting. They're in that odd spot right now. Is it before the free agency will be important? They'll tell you what they want to do with the draft. Part of what they did in the draft last year was address the offensive line. They had a guy who didn't play for them all year, the first pick. What did that do to set them back?
To me, Steve, this has been the case for 2 years, and if they ignore it again, they deserve everything they get. Their failure to address their defensive line, it has never been the same since Stephon Tuitt abruptly retired, early retired. They can't keep expecting Cam Hayward, who will be 36, to play at an all-pro level, and that he did this year is just, props to him. It's really amazing. He was, it was incredible how he was able to play, coming off, the injuries that plagued him last year, and that he was recognized for his ability to play. You know what? I was glad to see it because he was a dominant player at age 35, but you can't keep expecting that. Keanu Benton is a nice piece, but he's a nice piece. And then after those two, you can change the whole line. They need to go get a defensive lineman in the first round, and if it were up to me, I'd follow it right up with another one in the second round because that line got exposed as the season went on. 4 of the 6 guys who were they're on their 53 on the last for the playoff game and at the end of the season, 4 of those guys are going to be 30 and over next year. And so, and that includes Cam, of course. So something has to be done there. And to me, it has to be done with youth. And I think you will see, I certainly hope so, but you will. They need to do that in free agency. In the draft, because free agency, they're not going to go sign a big-name guy. I don't think so, but they need to address it in the draft high because the guys they've drafted before, 3rd round, 5th round, 6th round, that's not cutting it, Steve. You got to go find the next Cam Hayward, and you're not finding him on the 4th, 5th, and 6th round.
No question about that. No question. I mean, and the other part, too, is like, Dan Moore tries, Broderick Jones tries, but on the offensive line, the tackle play just leaves a lot to be desired, whether it's protection or a running game, don't you think?
Well, they needed to they were hoping to see a substantial jump and improvement in Broderick Jones. They liked what they saw as a rookie.
Sure.
But they did not like what they saw at the start of this year. And as the season went on, he got better. But now that's at right tackle, and they want to move him to left tackle.
Right.
So, that is a big leap of faith. Fautano will be back. Missed the entire season. 1 game he played, but he was so good in training camp. After 1 preseason game, they were putting him in the starting lineup.
Yes.
Zach Frazier was very good as the 2nd-round pick. Their rookie of the year. And he looks like he can be one of those longtime Steelers centers.
Yep.
But no matter what happens, they'll move on from Dan Moore, probably James Daniels as well, even though he was really good for them until he got hurt. You're going to have one of the youngest, most inexperienced offensive lines in the league next year. And that with Broderick Jones at left tackle. So now, as of right now, I don't know if they have any major plans to change that. They've spent a lot of time addressing their offensive line at the expense of addressing their defensive line. And they cannot afford to do that again.
What do you do with Najee Harris?
Steve, I think they move on from him. And I say that, you're talking about a guy, there's only a handful of guys who had 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons to start their career. Yeah. If they put it, they didn't pick up his option, which meant, okay, they thought they're not exactly fond of his future or committed to his future, I should say, with the team. If they put the franchise tag on him, it's 13-some million. If they put the transition tag on him, which a lot of teams don't use anymore, that's $10.5 million. And signing him to a long-term deal, I don't think that's in their financial future. I think they'll re-sign Jaylen Warren. He's a restricted free agent. They can tender him, even if they tender him one of those the high tender that prohibits him that they can match any offer. I think that will cost them $5 million. But they need to go get a running back who can get to the edge, and they don't have that guy. Cordell Patterson has a year left. Won't be shocked if he stays, and I won't be shocked if they let him go. Another guy in his 30s. They've gotten old with their backups pretty quick.
Yeah,
and that's why they have to be careful in free agency who they're bringing in. I do think in free agency you will see a quality receiver, and I think you'll see that high in the draft. And then, of course, they have Roman Wilson, who missed all year. But I think, to me, somewhere in the 3rd or 4th round, you've got to find a running back who can get to the edge. And look, there's running backs everywhere. You don't need to find one on the 1st round. We have seen that they are everywhere at all levels on all rounds. So, but find one who can get to the edge because they don't have that. Look at Jahmyr Gibbs type. I'm not saying that they're going to go get Jahmyr Gibbs, but that type is what you need.
I have to ask you about the golf league. I'm out in Phoenix, and I know Tiger was in Scottsdale when we were there for the Fiesta Bowl. Golf league starts. I'm watching it when I'm down in Miami at the Orange Bowl. I watched a little bit of it last night, and or whatever night it was this week, and Tiger didn't play well. What do you think of this concept? Because it's early in the week. It doesn't interfere with tournaments. What do you think of it?
I think it's probably nice TV in January and February to a degree. If they don't have Tiger, nobody cares. And to me, it's short-lived, Steve. It doesn't appeal to me. It's too gimmicky. I mean, I guess, you watch it a couple times. Yeah, that's cool. But anybody expects it to be real golf or a team competition. Come on, it's not. It's just it's a gimmicky made for TV type of thing. I think the arena, if you will, is really cool, but that's not going to be something that's going to keep people tuned in and watching. So they don't watch the Live Tour, even though it's hard to find. And I know they did just sign a new contract with Fox, and that's at least is close to real golf as you're going to get, because it is real golf. It's just a different concept. And this is too hokey, too gimmicky, and I don't expect it to last. But who knows? Who knows? I just can't imagine people repeatedly tuning in to watch it. They'll watch it, check out what's the novelty all about, and then move on from it.
Yeah, because I had to ask about that, because that to me is, I'm with you, it's a complete gimmick. It's a simulator. You and I going over and hit balls at a simulator. Do we really take it seriously? It was one where I watched for 5 minutes, and Tiger hit one, and it rolled back into the water, whatever. Water. And he had this look like, you got to be kidding me. It's a simulator. That's all it is.
And Steve, you're talking to a guy who, while he's working out, watches golf infomercials just to watch something golf. And I don't think it has much of a future. And like I said, I think it's something people tune in, watch it for a little bit, and it's like a bad Netflix series. They go, okay, that's enough. Let me go find something.
It's fun. He and I talk about stuff. We think the same way about everything. So it's like, that's great. Gerry, you're the best. Thanks so much. I always enjoy it, my friend. Thank you.
Steve, always a pleasure to chat with you, my friend. Dial me up anytime, as you know. I always enjoy our conversation.
You got it, Gerry. Thank you. The great Gerry Dulac. Doesn't get any better than him. Boy, we get some big-time people on this show, and he's one of them. All right. Great job by Todd, as always. He lines all this stuff up. I may be along for the ride, but it's a pretty good ride. We'll come back with more in a moment. Great to have you with us today. This half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com and News Radio 1070 WKOK.
There's something to be said about a sale with a handshake, a service technician who really knows what he's doing. They can explain it in English what the problem is. There's nothing better than having that friend you could trust in the area. That's Sunbury Motors, where you get selection, knowledgeable salespeople, and prices that fit your budget, and more important, that friend you can trust. Welcome to Sunbury Motors, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. You could shop other dealers and compare prices, but at Sunbury Motors, you get their lowest price promise. They research the current used vehicle market and guarantee their used car prices are the lowest. If you find a lower price, Sunbury Motors will beat it. 3 dealers all in one. See their full new and pre-owned inventory at sunburymotors.com. Pick out a vehicle you like and schedule your test drive online. Follow them on Facebook. Sunbury Motors Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf.